Things have changed since Lily was born. I used to see Mark's face light up when I walked into a room. Now, I'm lucky if I get a grunt before he buries his nose back into his phone. His job's the same, maybe even less stressful than before, but something in him switched off the day we brought her home. Another painting, Grace? What's that, the third this week? Mark's voice would grip the air, sharp and sneering whenever he watched me set up my easel. He used to admire my work, even had my best piece framed in his office once. Not anymore. Yeah, so? It's not like I'm spending your money, I'd answer, trying not to let him see the tremble in my hands, keeping my focus on mixing the blues and yellows on my palette. But inside, each word he volleyed felt like a punch. Could have fooled me. And look at this place. Looks like a damn tornado hit it. He'd scan the room, his eyes scanning every toy and blanket out of place, holding them up like evidence of my failures. Look, I'm with Lily all day, and she's a handful, I'd fight back, my voice not as steady as I'd liked. And maybe if you helped a little around here. Help? With what? You're home all the time, you deal with it. That was our deal, remember? I make the cash, you handle the rest. Not my fault you can't manage. He'd cut me off, leaving no room for argument. Every night ended the same, with him turning away and dismissing me with a scoff. When he left for work, Lily would tug at the hem of my shirt, her little eyes confused. Daddy mad? She would ask, her tiny lips quivering at the thought. No, baby, Daddy just has a lot on his mind. Here, help Mommy choose the colors, yeah? I'd pull her into my arms, trying to smile for her sake, guiding her hand to pick out colors. Together, we'd paint, and for a while, the bitterness in Mark's tone would get drowned out by her laughter and our shared world of color. I knew my paintings were good, not because I was full of myself, but because they were the only thing I had left from a time when I felt confident, vibrant. That evening, when Mark came home, I did what I always did. I tried to greet him with a warm dinner, a clean house, and Lily squeaky from her bath and dressed in her best pajamas. Hey, I said, the smell of roast chicken trailing behind me. How was your day? He grunted in reply, shrugging off his coat and throwing it over the couch. His eyes caught mine, then the easel set up in the corner of our living room. Still haven't gotten rid of that junk, huh? It's not junk, Mark. I'm working on something, I responded, the weariness seeping through. Looks like a waste of time. And money. You could be doing something productive, you know. He walked past me to the fridge, not waiting for an answer. Productive seemed to mean anything that made money or made his life easier. I wasn't doing either to his liking, I guessed. I am doing something, I said, my voice firmer now. I'm raising our daughter and keeping our home. And I'm trying to hang on to something that matters to me. My painting matters to me, Mark. He didn't even pause, just popped open a beer and drank deeply. Call it what you want, Grace. To me? Looks like you're just filling time, making a mess I'll have to pay someone to clean up. I felt the sting. Not from the unkindness of the words, I was getting used to that, but from the dismissal of my dreams, my passion. There wasn't a place for them in Mark's world anymore. Dinner's ready, I called out, in what felt like a weekly performance, standing with quivering hands as I served the meal. Mark's parents, seated like judges at the head of the table, barely noticed my effort to create a warm, hearty meal. Their eyes were fixed on the easel by the window. What's this then? Mark's dad, George, a broad man with a voice that filled the room, jabbed a finger towards my unfinished painting. Oh, that's just something Grace has been fooling around with, Mark chuckled, waving a dismissive hand before taking his seat. Real high-class stuff, right? Laughter rang out, and it twitched at my nerves, laughter that didn't reach their eyes. We're an artist now, are we? Chimed in Mark's mom, Patricia, her voice a kind of sharp that could slice steel. Why don't you show us your latest masterpiece, dear? George bellowed, his smile more of a challenge than a gesture of interest. I stood, rooted to the spot, feeling the flush spread up my neck. It's not done yet, I muttered, but Mark was already striding over to the canvas, grabbing it with less care than he'd take with a dish towel. "Look at this, folks," Mark laughed, flipping the canvas around like he was Vanna White revealing a letter on Wheel of Fortune. "It's supposed to be a landscape, can you believe it?" George's laughter bloomed loud again. "Looks like a blind dog's nightmare." Patricia tooted, shaking her head, her nostrils flaring with each chortle. "Why waste your time with this hobby? Get a job or do something, anything, productive." "As if any place would hire her," Mark snorted, setting the painting back with a thud that made my heart sink. "The job market's tough out there, and well, look at her." I swallowed, hard. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "I do plenty. I take care of Lily, and this house, and—" My words faltered under their collective stare. Patricia poked at the food with her fork as if she suspected it was poisoned. "Taking care of your family is the least you can do," she sniffed, "but honestly, Mark, if you'd married someone with a little ambition." They went on, tearing strips off me with every word, while I just stood there. The room closed in, their words pressing on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I felt myself slipping away, becoming smaller, insignificant in this grand performance of theirs. Something in me snapped. As soon as the meal ended, with a fake tremor in my voice, I excused myself, marched up the stairs, not looking back, and locked myself in the bedroom. "Grace?" Mark's voice climbed up the stairs, maybe half an hour later, cracking through the door. "You coming back down? We need to clear the table." I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, a scream or a sob would have come out, and I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of hearing my break. I scrolled through my bank app, a frown etching deeper lines on my face. Our account was looking dire again this month, and the grocery list wasn't getting any shorter. Lily needed new shoes, too. She was sprouting like a weed. Mark's voice tumbled in from the living room. "Grace, why is there a charge for $48.95 for Martin's art supplies?" "Just picked up a few things," I said, tapping through the app to transfer what remained of my personal savings to cover it. I needed them. Needed? Come on, Grace. That's money we could have put towards something important, isn't it? His voice was flat, bored even, with a hint of something else. Was it disappointment, frustration? I sighed. "Art is important to me, Mark. The same way your golf is important to you." I didn't mention the fact that his golf clubs cost more than a year's worth of my supplies. "Yeah, but golf is networking, it's part of my job. What does your painting get us?" "A cluttered house and wasted cash," he said, grumbling. "It gets me through the day," I murmured, feeling that old, familiar tug-of-war in my chest. Mark snorted. "Through the day? We have to be smart about money, not just spend it on whatever gets us through the day. Budget, Grace. Budget." That word felt like a choke chain. "I pay for my art supplies with my own money, Mark. The money I had before." I trailed off, not wanting another fight. My before was a long-gone chapter, one that contained a job, independence, and a once-shared dream of my own gallery. "Your money's our money, isn't it?" He shot back, the insinuation that my financial independence was history, clear in his tone. "And that your money is running out fast. What then?" Later at the store, I chose the cheaper brands, counting every cent, every compromise. With the rest, I bought the smallest tubes of paint, the ones I could slip into the cart without raising eyebrows. Back home, I unpacked the bags with robotic precision, every item a testament to our tightrope walk above financial ruin. "Putting back some luxuries, are we?" Mark commented, his gaze landing on the no-name cereal and store-brand pasta. "Yes, tightening the belt," I answered without looking at him, hiding the receipts, a paper trail of my crimes. He hummed, rummaging through the bags like an investigator looking for a slip-up. "Where are the Greek yogurts you like? And isn't this the cheap coffee?" I shrugged, busying myself with placing a can of tomatoes in the pantry. Prices went up. Had to make some cuts. "Don't see any cuts in your art budget, though," he said, a cold finger pointing out the new brushes I'd slipped under a loaf of bread. I turned to him, meeting his eyes for the first time since the conversation began. This keeps me sane, Mark. My art keeps me sane. My voice was firm, and I clenched my fist around the countertop to stop the shake in my hand. Well, sanity's quite the luxury item these days, eh? He nodded towards the brushes, his words deliberate, biting. That night, I painted not out of passion, but frustration. Each stroke was a challenge, a cut from our personal budget to fit it within the constraints of Mark's expectations. But as I worked, I remembered a time when these brushes were a joy to hold, not a weapon I had to defend. Mark was somewhere across the country, tangled up in business trip meetings when he decided to drop the latest task on me. His voice buzzed through my phone, sounding like he was already out the door before he even finished his sentence. Grace, you gotta pull together a birthday present for my boss's wife, Clara. Her big day's in a week. Okay, do you have any cash set aside for that? I asked, squinting at our already tight budget on my laptop screen. Nah, you figure it out. Just make it look like we put some thought into it, he muttered, sounding distracted. Hang on, you want something nice, but I'm supposed to magic up the funds for it? I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. You always find a way. Make it happen, Grace. And with that cheery little line, he was gone. I let out a long, slow breath, closing my eyes and trying to push back the frustration gnawing at my last nerve. Didn't have the cash, but I needed something that would knock Clara's socks off. No pressure, right? After a deep dive into Clara's online world, it was clear she had a thing for art. Her feed was full of gallery visits, pictures of canvases that probably cost more than our car. She even had photos with artists, talked about supporting the arts, patronage and all that jazz. An idea sparked, and I grabbed it before it could blaze out of my mind. A painting, from me. I had the paints. I had the canvas. I sure as hell had the motive. I'd give Clara something no one else could, not off some high street. I spun the idea in my mind, letting it settle. I could picture the brush strokes already, feel the drag of bristles against canvas. It would be personal, and it'd be free. Bonus. A painting, then. Decision made. I was going to need every minute of every day if it was going to look anything like the kind of stuff Clara posted. I pulled out my old easel, set it up in the living room, and got to work. All the while, fingers crossed that my little slice of creativity would cut it in the high-stakes world of business birthday gifts. Day 1 postmarks bombshell. I'm standing in the middle of my makeshift studio, a corner of the dining room I've cleared out, pushing the table against the wall. The morning light streaming in, kinda highlighting the chaos of my art supplies spread all over. Mommy, what's all this? Lily, my 6-year-old, parks herself right in the middle of the chaos, her eyes as round as the splattered paint drops on the floor. Mommy's gotta make a birthday present, baby. I reply, rifling through old brushes with bristles stiffer than my back feels. For who? She picks up a brush, examining the crusty edges like a pro. For a lady Daddy works with, I explain, snatching the brush from her before it becomes a makeshift sword or fairy wand. Lily's forehead scrunches up in confusion. But why can't Daddy buy something? Lily, go watch your cartoons, will ya? I need to think. I'm not in the mood to unpack the complexities of our bank account or my marriage to a kindergartner. Grumbling something under her breath, sounding too much like me for comfort, she trots off to the living room, leaving me to my quandary. The week grinds by. I'm pulling double shifts, daytime mommy, nighttime Picasso. The canvas starts to fill, taking on a life of its own. Something abstract, something that feels kind of like the whirlwind that's my life lately. I don't hear a peep from Mark. No check-in calls, not even a text asking how it's going. Guess he's too wrapped up in his charts and deals, and whatever he does that's too important to ring his wife. Lily, on the other hand, is my tiny shadow, always creeping back to watch me paint. You're really good, Mommy, she says on what, day 4? You should draw stuff more. I smile because that's probably the best review I'll ever get. Think so, huh? Maybe I will. The night before the big reveal, the painting's finally staring back at me, done. It's not just art, it's everything I haven't been able to say or do, all poured out onto canvas. I can't sleep that night, tossing and turning, thoughts swirling in my head. What if Clara hates it? What if Mark thinks I've wasted my time? What if? But the morning comes, clear and bright. The painting's wrapped up, no fancy paper, just brown parcel stuff, but neat. A nice bow from Lily's hair ribbons, because why not? So, there I was, at the boss's wife's birthday bash, my arms wrapped tight around a package, the painting I hoped would be a hit. I slid through the crowd, eyes low, wishing I could blend into the wallpaper. Mark was there too, just flown in hot from his latest trip, looking every inch the man who had it all, except the picture-perfect trophy wife. His eyes swept over the women, polished and perfect in their cocktail dresses, then landed on me like a ton of bricks. I saw that look on his face, like he just bit into a lemon. He looked me up and down and shook his head just enough so only I'd notice. The room faded a bit, like someone turned down the volume on the party, and all I could hear was my heartbeat in my ears. Then his gaze zeroed in on the parcel, all wrapped up and nestled in my shaky grip. His eyes flashed, and oh boy, I knew that look. I saw the storm brewing before the first word even shot out. "What's that?" he spat, barely keeping a lid on it. I pulled the package closer, as if I could shield it, and me, from what was coming. "It's a gift. My painting." The words barely had a chance to hang in the air before his voice boomed. "A painting? You're kidding, right?" It was loud, loud enough to catch a few glances our way. I tried to shush him with my eyes, but he was past caring. "You actually think this is okay? To hand her a piece of amateur hour?" The whispers around us started like the start of a rain, soft but getting stronger. "Mark, please, not here," I begged, my cheeks flaming up something fierce. "Did you lose your mind?" he roared, and the room didn't just pause, it froze. "You make us look like fools." By now, we were the main event. Eyes flicked to us, then away, then back again like they were watching tennis. I shrank, wished I could melt right into the floorboards. His face was a shade of red I'd only ever seen on traffic lights. "Great, just great, Grace," he vented, throwing his hands up. "You don't think, do ya?" The heat in my face told me I was blushing, and not in a cute way. My hands shook, but I hugged the painting tighter, 'cause what else was there to hang on to? I took a breath, tried to remember why I thought this was a good idea. "Now everyone's gonna have a go at us, thanks to you and your dumb idea," he added, sharp as a knife, for anyone still pretending they weren't listening. My mouth opened, words ready to tumble out, to defend or maybe just to tell him to put a sock in it. But what was there to say with the whole room's eyes burning holes into us? Instead, I just stood there, the fool he called me, wishing the ground would do me a favor and swallow me whole. The laughter after Mark's outburst felt like daggers. Even with the room spinning, I caught the boss's eye. He was just watching, all quiet, with something like confusion on his face. And his wife, Clara, she had this half-concerned, half-intrigued frown that actually gave me a sliver of hope. Clara waved a hand, cutting through the noise. "Quiet down, everyone. Let's see what Grace has brought." I moved on autopilot, my hands still a bit jittery as they tore the paper from the canvas. The art kinda just spilled out into the room, all the colors and the shapes I'd spent nights pouring myself into. Clara's eyebrows shot up. "Oh my," she said, and the room hushed like they were waiting for her to drop the hammer. But then she continued, "This is quite something, Grace." Mark was still fuming by my side. "Yeah, something all right." I ignored him and searched Clara's face for some sign. It's for you," I mumbled. "Happy birthday?" She tilted her head, studying the painting like it was a puzzle. "It's bold. I like bold. Don't you, darling?" She nudged her husband, pulling him into this. The boss was a tough guy to read, but he nodded. "Don't see something like that every day." Mark tried to jump back in. "Oh, come on, you're saying you like this mess?" And there it was, the snap in Clara's voice as she turned to him with a squint. Mark, I'd watch it if I were you. Your wife has talent, and I won't have you embarrass her any further. It's unbecoming. The room fell into this tense kind of quiet, the kind where you could hear someone sneeze 3 houses down. Look at the colors, the feeling in it, Clara was saying now. It's got life. Mark tried for a save. Well, sure, if you like that sort of thing. But Clara cut him off. I do. It's decided. This goes right in the foyer. I blinked. Was this actually happening? You sure, babe? The boss chimed in. It's not exactly. Clara shot him a look, and he trailed off. Standard. Right. It's unique. Her arm shot out to me, a beacon in the high heels and overpriced suit. See. Thank you, Grace. This here's a real gift, folks. It's got soul. And just like that, the murmurs started up again, but they had a different tune. People were nodding, some even looking at me with what felt like respect. Clara, still holding my painting like it was a treasure, turned her eyes on me again. So, Grace, she said, drawing the room's focus, ever thought about showing your work? Like in a gallery? Mark let out a scoff. I heard it, but my eyes were glued to Clara. Nah, who'd want to see my stuff? Don't worry, Grace. I would. And I know people. Clara's voice was firm, her eyes sharp. Mark tried to laugh it off. Come on, Clara, she's just dabbling. Clara quirked an eyebrow at him. So she dabbles better than some pros I know. What's it to you? I swallowed, feeling like I was teetering on the edge of something big. I don't know. I've never. What's to know? You jump in. I'll help. Right? Clara's look said she wasn't asking, she was telling. A giggle slipped from me. It was nervous, a bit wild-sounding even to my own ears. Sure, right. Clara beamed. Good. It's settled then. After that, whispers flitted around like moths to a flame. People who barely gave me the time of day were now hanging on my arm, talking about my work. It felt surreal, like walking through someone else's life. Mark was suddenly there again, his hand on my back almost scalding. You're not serious about this, are you? There was that edge in his voice, like a knife threatening to cut. I turned to him, feeling the weight of the crowd, the pull of something new. Yeah, I am. My voice was stronger than it had felt in years. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time that night. But, what about us? What about us, Mark? I repeated. We've been over for a longer time than I want to admit. That shook him. He stepped back. I thought we were fine. I turned to face him fully. You thought wrong. The words were colder than I intended, but they needed to be said. Mark ran a hand through his hair, looking beaten. So what, we just end it? I looked down at the colors splashed across the nails on my fingers, at the rings that didn't mean what they were supposed to anymore. We ended it a long time ago. Now we're just making it official. He didn't have anything to say to that. I watched him walk away, his shoulders hunched. Clara's hand touched my shoulder. You okay, hon? I nodded. I am. Thanks to you. She winked. What are friends for, right? And you, Grace? She paused, giving my shoulder a squeeze. You're going to light up this town with your art. Just you wait. And with that, I felt my heart start to hammer for a whole new set of reasons. Ahead of me, there wasn't just an ending. There was a beginning, and it was painted in the boldest colors I could imagine. Lily and I? We'd be more than fine. We'd be us, unapologetically, unfalteringly us.
In the lush heart of an upscale neighborhood stood the property that could change my life. The price tag alone, $1.5 million, screamed luxury, but as I walked through its opulent hallways beside my husband Nathan, a sense of unease gnawed at me. Meredith, look at this place. Nathan's eyes sparkled with an almost childlike glee. Imagine us here, hosting parties, living the dream. I tried to mirror his enthusiasm, but a voice inside me whispered caution. It's stunning, Nathan, but the price. Can we really manage this, even with Dad's help? Nathan laughed, his voice echoing in the grand foyer. Your dad won't mind. He's got more than enough. This is our chance, Meredith. Our future. His words felt like a mask slipping, revealing a glimmer of greed I hadn't seen before. We continued the tour in silence until we reached the garden. The real estate agent, a sharply dressed man named Mr. Collins, excused himself to take a call. Go on out, Nathan. I'll catch up, I said, needing a moment alone. Nathan nodded and stepped outside. That's when Mr. Collins returned, his face unusually somber. Mrs. Thompson, I need a word, in private, his tone urgent. Puzzled, I followed him into a small study. He closed the door with a definitive click and turned to face me. Mrs. Thompson, what I'm about to say must stay between us. Your husband, Nathan, he's involved in something illegal. My heart skipped a beat. What? That's impossible. Nathan's a good man. Mr. Collins sighed, his eyes holding a gravity I hadn't noticed before. I have friends in law enforcement. They've been tracking a drug ring and Nathan's name came up. I can't divulge more, but you should know. I felt my world tilt. Nathan involved in drugs? It couldn't be. Yet. Hadn't I sensed something off? You need to leave him, Mrs. Thompson, for your safety, Mr. Collins added. A bitter laugh escaped me. You expect me to end my marriage based on this? Mr. Collins's gaze was steady. I understand this is hard to accept. Just be careful. Consider what I've said. I left the room in a daze, the lavish walls of the house now feeling like a gilded cage. Outside, Nathan was admiring the garden, oblivious to the storm raging in my mind. Everything okay, honey? He asked, wrapping an arm around my waist. Yeah, just a bit overwhelmed by all this, I lied, forcing a smile. As we drove home, Nathan chattered about the house, our future, his dreams, but my thoughts were a whirlwind of doubt and fear. Was the man I married not who I thought he was? The words of Mr. Collins echoed in my mind, a sinister undercurrent to Nathan's enthusiastic plans. That night, as Nathan slept beside me, his face peaceful in the moonlight, I made a decision. I needed the truth. And if Nathan was the man Mr. Collins claimed he was, then I would make him pay. For my heart, for my trust, for everything. Revenge, a word I never thought would belong to me, settled in my heart. Nathan had chosen his path. Now it was time to choose mine. Months before the property viewing, life with Nathan seemed almost idyllic. We were the couple our friends envied, always laughing, always together. But as I lay awake that night, the past replayed in my mind, revealing cracks I had chosen to ignore. Meredith, I'll be out late tonight. Drinks with the guys, Nathan had said one evening, his tone casual. I remembered nodding, a smile fixed on my face. Sure, have fun. Just don't stay out too late. As I thought back, I realized these late nights had become more frequent. Nathan, once eager to spend every moment with me, now seemed to find any excuse to be away. I had dismissed it as pre-marriage jitters, the last hurrahs of bachelorhood. But now, doubt crept in like a shadow. The following morning, I decided to confront Nathan. Over breakfast, I broached the subject. Nathan, we need to talk. You've been out a lot lately? Is everything okay? He looked up from his coffee, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. It's nothing, Meredith. Just enjoying my freedom while I can. You know, before the ball and chain. His words stung, and I pushed back my chair, standing up. Is that how you see our marriage? A ball and chain? Nathan's expression softened, and he reached for my hand. I didn't mean it like that, Meredith. I love you. I'm just getting it all out of my system. I wanted to believe him, to return to the blissful ignorance I had basked in. But the seed of doubt Mr. Collins planted refused to be ignored. That afternoon, I called my best friend Lisa, seeking a sounding board. Lisa, do you think I'm overreacting? Nathan's been so distant lately. Lisa's voice was hesitant. Meredith, you know I love you both, but I've seen Nathan out. He's not always with the guys. Her words were a punch to my gut. What do you mean? He's been seen around town with some unsavory characters. I didn't want to say anything, but I felt a chill run down my spine. Nathan's late nights, his evasive answers, and now Mr. Collins's warning, it all began to form a sinister picture. Over the next few days, I observed Nathan. His phone, once left carelessly around the house, was now always on him, buzzing with constant messages. His once warm demeanor towards me cooled, replaced by a detached politeness. One evening, as Nathan prepared for another night out, I confronted him again. "Nathan, who are you meeting tonight? You're always so secretive." He paused, his back to me. "Just some old friends. You wouldn't know them." The lie was evident, and I felt a surge of anger. "Nathan, I'm your wife. If there's something going on, you can tell me." He turned, his eyes hard. "There's nothing to tell, Meredith. Just drop it." As he left, slamming the door behind him, I felt a resolve harden within me. Nathan was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. No more excuses, no more lies. I was done playing the dutiful, oblivious wife. That night, as I sat alone in our cold, silent house, I knew one thing for certain. The man I married was a stranger, and I was going to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The ensuing days felt like walking through a thick fog. Each smile Nathan flashed, every affectionate gesture now seemed tainted with duplicity. I watched him, the man I had pledged my life to, with a skeptic's eye, searching for the truth behind his mask. One evening, as we sat in our living room surrounded by real estate brochures, Nathan's true nature began to emerge more clearly. "Meredith, look at this one," he said, pointing to a brochure featuring a mansion that screamed opulence. "Your dad won't mind footing the bill for this, right?" I felt a pang of disgust at his casual expectation of my father's wealth. "Nathan, we need to be realistic. We can't exploit my father's generosity." He laughed, a sound that once warmed my heart, now chilling it. "Come on, Meredith. Your dad's loaded. He'd want his little girl to live in luxury." I stared at him, the man I thought I knew, now a stranger driven by greed. "My father's money isn't a ticket to your lavish fantasies, Nathan." His face darkened, and for a moment I saw the man Mr. Collins had warned me about. "So what? You're choosing your dad over me?" I stood up, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "This isn't about choosing sides. It's about respect and responsibility, something you seem to have forgotten." Nathan stood as well, his eyes flashing with something akin to fury. "You know what, Meredith? Maybe you're the one who's forgotten what this marriage is about." I felt a cold resolve settle over me. "And what is that, Nathan? Using me for my father's money?" He didn't respond, turning away with a dismissive wave of his hand. That night, I lay in bed, the space between us wider than the physical distance. My mind was made up. I needed to protect myself and my family from this man who had become an embodiment of betrayal. The following day, I made a call to a private investigator. If Nathan wouldn't give me the truth, I would find it myself. I recounted Nathan's late nights, his sudden interest in expensive properties, and Mr. Collins's alarming revelation. "I need to know what he's hiding," I told the investigator. "I need evidence." As I set the plan in motion, a part of me mourned the loss of the love I once felt, but that grief was overshadowed by a burning desire for justice. Nathan had made his choice, and now I was making mine. Weeks passed, and the investigator provided me with updates. Nathan's business meetings were nothing more than rendezvous with known criminals. The late nights were not spent with friends, but in shady dealings. Each report was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. I confronted Nathan one last time, armed with the evidence. "I know about your dealings, Nathan. I know about the people you've been meeting." His reaction was not of remorse, but of rage. "You had me followed? You spied on me?" "Yes, because you left me no choice," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I trusted you, Nathan, and you betrayed me." He scoffed, turning away. "You're just like everyone else. You don't understand what it takes to make it in this world." As he left the room, I knew there was no turning back. I had seen the real Nathan, a man consumed by greed and deceit, and I would not let him destroy me. I would fight back with every resource at my disposal. Nathan would learn that betrayal comes at a price, and I would be the one to collect it. The day of the property viewing loomed like a dark cloud. I knew it was more than just looking at houses. It was a confrontation with the truth about Nathan. As we drove in silence, my mind raced with the reports from the private investigator and the images of Nathan's secret life. The man next to me was a stranger, his charming facade now a grotesque mask. Upon arriving, the property's grandeur was overshadowed by the weight of my impending revelation. Nathan seemed oblivious, lost in visions of a life built on lies and deceit. The real estate agent, Mr. Collins, greeted us with a professionalism that felt cold. His eyes met mine, a silent acknowledgement of the storm brewing beneath the surface. As we toured the lavish rooms, Nathan's excitement was palpable. "Imagine the parties we could have here, Meredith. This is the life we deserve." His words echoed hollowly in my ears. "Deserve? Based on what, Nathan? Your lies? Your illegal activities?" He stopped, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "What are you talking about?" "I know everything, Nathan. The late nights, the criminals, the drugs. You've been living a double life." His facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of the man he truly was. "You've been snooping around, spying on me?" "Yes, because I needed to know the truth," I said, my voice unwavering. Nathan's expression hardened. "You think you're better than me, Meredith? You think you're above it all with your perfect life and your rich daddy?" The accusation stung, but I stood my ground. "This isn't about me, Nathan. This is about you and the choices you've made." He scoffed, turning away. "You don't understand anything." As he stormed off, Mr. Collins approached me, his expression grave. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Mrs. Thompson, but you needed to know the truth." I nodded. My resolve strengthened. "Thank you, Mr. Collins. I needed to see it for myself." Leaving the property, I knew what I had to do. Nathan's betrayal couldn't go unpunished. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a criminal who used me as a stepping stone for his ambitions. That evening, I sat alone in our now tainted home, planning my next move. Nathan's world would come crashing down, and I would be the one to pull the lever. He would pay for his deceit, not just legally, but personally. I would ensure that his fall from grace was as steep as the pedestal he had placed himself upon. The game had changed, and I was no longer a pawn in Nathan's twisted world. I was now the player, and it was my turn to make a move. The next few days were a blur of cold determination. My plan for retribution against Nathan took shape, each step meticulously crafted. I reached out to Mr. Collins, seeking more information and solidifying my resolve. We met in a discreet cafe, the buzz of the city a stark contrast to our somber conversation. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Collins began, his voice low, "I've gathered more evidence. It's worse than we thought." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos and documents, undeniable proof of Nathan's entanglement in criminal activities. My hands trembled as I leafed through the evidence. How could he be so reckless? "It's greed, Mrs. Thompson. It blinds people," Mr. Collins replied. I looked up, my eyes burning with a mix of fury and sorrow. "I want to bring him down. He can't get away with this." Collins nodded. "I understand. You have my full support." The following day, I confronted Nathan. He returned home, his usual arrogance on display. I was waiting, the folder of evidence in hand. "Nathan, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. He smirked, unaware of the storm about to break. "What now, Meredith? More accusations?" I threw the folder on the table. "No, not accusations. Proof." His smirk vanished as he flipped through the documents. "Where did you get this?" "That's not important. What matters is that your lies are over," I said. Nathan's face contorted with rage. "You think you can corner me like this? You're nothing without me, Meredith." His words were like venom, but I stood unshaken. "I was everything before you, and I'll be everything after you're gone. Your time is up, Nathan." He lunged at me, but I was ready. Stepping aside, I let his momentum carry him forward, crashing into the furniture. "Stay away from me," I warned, my heart pounding. Nathan picked himself up, his eyes wild. "You'll pay for this, Meredith. You think you've won? This is far from over." But I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew his world was crumbling. "I'm going to the authorities," I declared. "You're going to face the consequences of your actions." As he stormed out, I knew the battle was just beginning. But I was prepared. Nathan had underestimated me, and that was his biggest mistake. My heart ached with the betrayal and loss, but it was overshadowed by a burning desire for justice. Nathan's fall from grace would be a spectacle, and I would be the architect of his demise. This was more than revenge. It was retribution for every lie, every deceitful smile, every moment he thought he could use me and walk away unscathed. The game of deception was over, and I was writing the final act. Nathan would learn that betrayal comes with a price, and I was here to collect. The day of reckoning arrived with a heavy air. I stood in the living room, the evidence of Nathan's betrayal neatly compiled on the coffee table, waiting for him to return. My heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. Today, Nathan's charade would end. The sound of the door opening sent a shiver down my spine. Nathan walked in, his usual confident stride faltering as he saw the determined look in my eyes. "Meredith, what's this about?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. "It's about the truth, Nathan," I replied, my voice unwavering. "The truth about who you really are." He scoffed, attempting to deflect. "You're being dramatic. Let's just talk this out." I pushed the folder towards him. "Talk? Like how you talked your way into illegal dealings? Or how you talked about love while betraying everything we stood for?" Nathan's facade began to crumble, his eyes betraying a flicker of panic. "Meredith, you don't understand. I did this for us, for our future." "By destroying it?" I countered sharply. "You did this for yourself, Nathan. Your greed, your lies, you've ruined everything." He lunged towards me, his face contorted with rage. "You think you can judge me? You, with your perfect life and your daddy's money?" I stepped back, my resolve hardening. "This isn't about me, Nathan. It's about your crimes, your choices, and now you're going to face the consequences." Nathan's anger turned to desperation. "Meredith, please. We can fix this. I can fix this." But it was too late. "There's nothing left to fix, Nathan. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." With a trembling hand, I dialed the number I had prepared. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air, and police officers arrived at our door. Nathan's face drained of color as he realized the gravity of the situation. "You called the police?" "Yes, Nathan. It's over," I said, a mix of relief and sorrow washing over me. As the officers handcuffed him, Nathan turned to me, his eyes filled with a toxic combination of anger and disbelief. "You'll regret this, Meredith. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." But I stood firm, watching as he was led away. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger whose deceit and greed had consumed him. In the silence that followed, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had done what was necessary, not just for me, but for the justice that Nathan had so callously disregarded. The path ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it. Nathan's betrayal had shattered my trust, but it had also revealed a strength in me I never knew I had. As I looked around the empty house, I realized that this was not an end but a beginning of a new chapter, one where I was no longer a victim of deceit but a survivor, ready to rebuild my life on my own terms. The days following Nathan's arrest were a whirlwind of emotions and legal proceedings. Sitting in the courtroom, watching the man I once loved now reduced to a criminal defendant, I felt a complex mix of triumph and heartache. As the judge delivered the verdict, guilty on multiple counts, Nathan's face was a mask of defeat. He turned to look at me, his eyes a mix of anger and despair. In that moment, I saw the remnants of the man I had married, buried under layers of greed and deception. Outside the courtroom, the press swarmed, eager for a statement. I faced them, my voice steady. "Justice has been served today. It's a sad day when someone you trusted betrays not just you, but the law." The following weeks were a time of reflection. I realized that my marriage to Nathan had been built on a foundation of lies. But I also recognized the strength and resilience I had found within myself. I decided to start anew, leaving behind the tainted memories of our shared home. Selling the property, I moved into a smaller, cozier place, one that represented my new beginning. One day, while settling into my new life, I received a call. It was Nathan's parents. They wanted to meet, to apologize for their son's actions. We met at a quiet cafe, and the remorse in their eyes was genuine. "Meredith, we're so sorry for what Nathan did to you," his mother said, her voice quivering. I nodded, acknowledging their pain. "Thank you, but Nathan's choices were his own. You don't need to bear his guilt." His father, a stoic man, handed me an envelope. "We know it can't undo the harm, but please accept this as a token of our apology." I opened the envelope to find a substantial check. I hesitated, then pushed it back. "I appreciate the gesture, but I cannot accept this. Nathan's actions are not your responsibility." Their gratitude was evident, and we parted ways with a mutual understanding and respect. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. The experience with Nathan had changed me, but it had also opened my eyes to my own strength and the importance of trust and integrity. One day, I received news that Nathan had been released on parole. A part of me tensed at the thought of facing him again, but I realized that he no longer had power over me. I had moved on. leaving the shadows of our past behind. I learned that Nathan had started working, trying to rebuild his life. Whether he had truly changed, I didn't know, but it was no longer my concern. My journey had taught me that some people come into our lives as lessons, and Nathan had been my harshest one. As I walked through the park, the sun setting in a brilliant array of colors, I felt a sense of peace. The chapter of my life with Nathan was closed, but my story was far from over. In the end, I had not just survived, I had thrived. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them with a heart that was stronger, wiser, and more open than ever before.